The road to the cottage twisted through thick pine trees, each branch clawing at the misty air like crooked fingers. Lena's car headlights barely pierced the dense fog as she drove deeper into the woods. It felt like entering another world, one untouched by time or reason. The tires crunched over gravel and brittle leaves, the only sound breaking the suffocating silence. The house appeared suddenly, old, wooden, and leaning slightly to one side, as if it had grown tired of standing. It sat at the forest edge, shrouded in a stillness that made the hairs on Lena's arms rise. She stepped out, her breath ghosting into the icy night. Inside, the cottage felt forgotten. The air smelled faintly of burnt wood and something older, mildew, or maybe dust stirred from long silence. The fireplace sat unused but ready, and a single light bulb flickered overhead. The wooden floor groaned under her weight with each step. Time seemed slower here, as if every second had to push through something invisible. Lena dropped her bags near an old rocking chair and walked around. The windows were fogged over, but she could see the forest pressed up against the glass, as though it were watching her arrival with a quiet hunger. She lit a fire to push back the cold, but the warmth barely touched her skin. Shadows clung to the corners of every room, unmoving and patient. Lena settled at a small desk by the window, sketchpad in hand, trying to shake the unease crawling up her spine. Outside, the wind began to rise, whispering through the trees. It sounded almost like words, soft, distant, unintelligible murmurs. She froze, pencil mid-stroke, straining her ears. It wasn't just the wind. Something was out there, pacing the tree line, dragging slowly across bark and snow. The clock on the mantel struck 3:30 a.m. Lena looked up in surprise. She hadn't realized how long she'd been drawing. The whispering outside grew louder, more urgent, though there was no storm. Her hand trembled as she put the pencil down. Then, just as she turned to stoke the fire, there was a sound. 3 deliberate knocks. Slow, deep, hollow. They echoed through the cottage like footsteps in a church. She stood frozen, heart hammering. No one should be here. Not at this hour. Not in this place. The door, barely visible in the flickering light, stood still, but something waited just beyond it. She tiptoed closer, drawn by a mixture of fear and disbelief. The knocking had stopped, but now the silence felt heavier, like the cottage was holding its breath. She reached for the door but hesitated, remembering the locals' warning at the gas station. No matter what you hear, don't open the door after midnight. Goosebumps crawled up her arms as she backed away. Her reflection in the window caught her eye. It looked strange, off by just a second. Her breath hitched. Then she heard it again, faint breathing. Not hers, from just the other side of the door. Something was there, something waiting. The morning arrived, not with sunlight, but a dull gray haze seeping through the windows like watered down fear. Lena hadn't slept. She'd curled up on the couch with the fire burned out and her ears trained on every creak of the house. The knocking hadn't returned, but the silence after it had been worse. Like something watching from the other side, deciding. She walked to the door, still shut, still locked, but she noticed something new, a faint smudge across the wood, like a handprint left in ash. Her fingers hovered over it before stepping back. She needed air, or distraction, anything to prove last night hadn't been real. While exploring the cottage in daylight, Lena found a hollow, sounding plank beneath the bed. Curious, she pried it loose and discovered a small leather-bound journal buried beneath the floorboards. It was worn and cracked, the pages curled like they'd absorbed secrets too long. She opened it, revealing entries scribbled in uneven handwriting, rushed, fearful. The first line chilled her. It comes at 3:33. Lena sat cross, legged on the floor, flipping through each page, feeling dread coil tighter with every sentence. The words weren't fiction. They were warnings, desperate ones, from someone who had once lived here and had heard the same knocks. One entry described hearing a knock at 3:33 a.m. for several nights in a row. The writer never opened the door, but they grew obsessed with whatever was on the other side. They wrote about scratching in the walls, reflections that didn't match, voices mimicking loved ones. Lena's eyes widened as she read. I looked once, through the peephole. I don't remember what I saw, but it remembers me. Her skin went cold. The journal's tone shifted from curiosity to terror in later pages. Paragraphs turned into fragmented sentences, then one repeated phrase again and again. Do not open the door. Over and over. Near the end, the entries became almost illegible, scrawled furiously, bleeding into each other as if the writer had been shaking. The last complete sentence read, I made the mistake. Now it comes through the mirrors. Below that, there was a splash of brown red, dried and faded with time. Blood. Lena snapped the journal shut and stared at the bedroom mirror. For a moment, she thought she saw something move, something deeper than her reflection, like another face pulling back just as she looked. The silence around her now felt full, pressurized, like something was listening, like something had been waiting for her to read those words. She placed the journal on the table, unsure whether to keep it close or burn it. Outside, the forest had darkened unnaturally early, shadows crawling faster than they should. She stepped toward the fireplace, wanting to destroy the journal, to end whatever trail it had started. But a low creak came from the hall, slow, deliberate, like footsteps. The cottage had grown colder, despite the sunlight. She turned back to the journal. One new line had appeared at the bottom of the last page, a line she hadn't seen before. Fresh ink, it read. You heard it too, didn't you? Lena staggered back. She was no longer alone. Lena couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was hiding something, something that hadn't always been there. That evening, drawn by a strange impulse and a strange, rhythmic tapping at her window, she stepped outside into the dusk. A narrow path had appeared, one she hadn't noticed before, lined with footprints in the snow, bare, human, and leading deep into the trees. Against every instinct, she followed. The forest greeted her with a suffocating stillness. The deeper she walked, the more the air thickened, as if it were resisting her presence. Branches twisted above like crooked limbs, blotting out the fading sky. It was as if the forest was swallowing the light, and her. As Lena pushed forward, the temperature dropped sharply, her breath becoming mist that hovered like spirits around her. Strange carvings began to appear on the trees, symbols that looked older than language. A chill ran through her spine. She felt watched, not by animals, but by something ancient and aware. Whispers returned, faint but familiar, echoing from all directions. They murmured her name in soft, overlapping voices. She stopped, trying to trace the sound, but it was impossible. It came from everywhere. Then she spotted it, a decrepit hunting cabin, partially buried beneath gnarled roots and snow, leaning as if trying to fall and bury itself. The door creaked open with a reluctant groan as Lena stepped inside. Dust choked the air, and the walls were stained dark with age. The stench of rot was overwhelming. But what caught her breath was the writing. Every inch of the interior had been scratched with messages. Don't answer. Don't let it see you. It knows. One message repeated near the floor read. It waits in the mirrors. Lena's pulse pounded. In the corner of the room stood a shattered mirror, pieces rearranged to form a twisted reflection. In it, she saw herself, but not quite. Her reflection was smiling when she wasn't. It blinked when she didn't. She stumbled back from the mirror, but her reflection remained still, watching her. Its smile widened unnaturally. Then the whispers rose into a crescendo. The walls began to creak, as if something was shifting within them. Lena turned to flee, but the door had vanished, replaced by a blank, root-covered wall. Her panicked breath echoed in the cramped space. Shadows in the corner twitched and thickened, taking form. A figure, tall and faceless, peeled itself from the darkness, long fingers twitching like branches. Just before it reached her, the mirror behind her exploded, sending shards into the air like frozen screams. The room fell silent. Lena was outside again, on her knees in the snow just beyond the forest line, heart pounding and throat raw from screaming she didn't remember. The cabin was gone. Behind her, no footprints led back to the path. The woods looked peaceful but wrong, too still. As she turned toward the cottage, she saw new footprints, bare and deep, now leading to her front door. They hadn't been there before. She felt something pressing against her back, a breath not her own curling at her ear. She ran, not daring to look back. Whatever was in the forest had followed her home, and it had found the way in. Back inside the cottage, Lena locked every door and window, nailed the front door shut with furniture, and unplugged every mirror she could cover. The journal sat in the fireplace now, half burned, though the ink refused to fully fade. Her hands trembled as she held a fire poker like a weapon, though deep down she knew it wouldn't help. The silence in the house had changed. It no longer felt empty. Shadows lingered too long. The fire gave off no warmth. The clock on the mantel ticked louder than usual, every click like a countdown. Lena didn't need to look. She already knew what time it was approaching. 3:33 a.m. The moment the second hand struck its place, it began. Knock, knock. Each pound echoed deeper than the wood, like it was striking something inside her. Lena sat frozen in the center of the room, refusing to breathe. This time, the knocks were angry, sharp, impatient. Then they stopped. But the silence that followed was worse. The air changed. She could feel it, as if the house exhaled something ancient and wrong. Then the sound of footsteps, inside, crept from the back hallway. Heavy, slow dragging. But nothing had opened. No locks had broken. It hadn't come through the door. It didn't need to. Lena crawled backward, her eyes fixed on the hallway as each step grew closer. A soft scratching began along the walls, like nails dragging across wood. Then came the whisper. A voice mimicking hers, faint but unmistakable, "Please, help me." It repeated, growing louder, overlapping itself in dozens of broken tones. She stumbled into the bathroom, slammed the door, and flipped the light on. It buzzed and flickered, the mirror trembling as condensation formed instantly over the glass. Her own face looked back, terrified, lips parted, shaking. Then, behind her reflection, another figure appeared. It wore her face too, but its eyes were black. She screamed and covered the mirror with a towel, heart racing. Then, suddenly, the journal burst into flames inside the fireplace where she had left it. From the crackling fire, another sound emerged, distorted whispers, chanting in reverse. She pressed her hands over her ears, but the voices found their way in. The air thickened. Her breath grew short. In the hallway, the footsteps stopped. Then something scratched gently at the bathroom door, slowly, rhythmically. The knob turned once, then back again. And then she heard it, her own voice, whispering from just outside. "You opened it, didn't you?" The bathroom light flickered one last time and went out completely. Lena screamed as the mirror shattered, glass flying into her skin, slicing across her arms and face. A darkness poured from the mirror, not just absence of light, but something living. She tried to push the door open, but it wouldn't budge. It was inside. She wasn't sure how or where, but it was inside. Her reflection's face flickered on every remaining shard, all of them smiling. Then everything went black. When the lights returned, she was back in the living room. The fire had died, the door was no longer blocked, and it stood wide open. Morning arrived, but it brought no warmth or clarity. The sky outside was gray, the light weak and sour. Lena woke in her bed, unsure how she got there. Her arms were bandaged with strips of torn bedsheet, and blood had dried along her cheek. Her memory flickered like a broken film reel. Knocking, mirrors, whispers. She sat up trembling and looked around. Everything in the cottage seemed unchanged, yet wrong. The fireplace was cold, but the ashes from the burned journal still smoldered faintly. She stood on shaky legs, stepping cautiously toward the door. It was closed again. No sign of intrusion. But something inside her whispered, "It's still here." She moved through the house slowly, every creak of the floor sounding like a scream. In the hallway mirror, her reflection stared back, but it lagged. Her hand moved, and the mirror responded half a second too late. Lena froze. The reflection blinked when she didn't. A sharp chill swept over her skin as she backed away. Her phone buzzed once on the table. A message. "Thank you for letting me in." Her breath caught. She hadn't given her number to anyone. Then the room around her dimmed, as if a shadow passed through it, without shape but full of weight. Her home wasn't hers anymore. Later that day, Lena tried to leave. She packed quickly, avoiding her own gaze in any surface. But when she stepped outside, the road was gone. In its place stood an endless line of trees, twisted together like ribs of something sleeping. The world beyond the house had shifted. She ran until her legs gave out, sobbing into the earth. But no matter which direction she turned, she ended up back at the front steps. The cottage was no longer in the town, or even in her reality. It was a cage now, a vessel. She wasn't its owner. She was its occupant, or worse, its offering. That night, 3:33 a.m. came like a promise. She didn't wait for the knock. It never came. Instead, the shadows walked freely now, their limbs brushing the walls, whispering through the vents. From every mirror and darkened window, her own face smiled at her, eyes entirely black. The whispers no longer mimicked others. They came from her own voice now, speaking secrets she never told anyone. She sat in the center of the living room, numb, watching her reflection circle her like a vulture. It leaned from the mirror and whispered, "You're part of me now." And she couldn't tell if the voice came from her mind or her mouth. Weeks passed. The house stood silent in the fog again, seemingly abandoned. No one visited. But if you walk past the edge of that forgotten forest, if you listen closely around 3:33 a.m., you might hear it 3 slow knocks, echoing from behind the door. No one sees Lena anymore, but some say she still watches from the windows. And if you're foolish enough to knock back, you'll find the door opens on its own, and inside stands a girl smiling with empty eyes. She'll invite you in, and once you cross that threshold, you never truly leave again, because now you're the guest.